In this video we're going to look at adding in some more advanced user interface elements to allow us a bit more control in terms of selecting data inputs, as well as a bit more of an advanced data output with a interactive map. So the first few steps in the tutorial are just setting up a basic Kivy app with two screens. And the main screen, we're just going to have a label and a button to action the application. So I won't explain too much about that because it's all stuff we have done before. But we'll get into it from about step 4, which is adding in our file selector. So previously, when we've done things like in Project 6, for example, where we were selecting a certain file, we had just hard-coded the file in that we wanted to access. Obviously, that's not always what we want to do. We want to have a bit more flexibility about what data we use and what files we input. So using a file selector is helpful with that. So the file selector is actually an example of the FileChooser object, which is built into Kivy. We're just going to customize it with a couple of things to suit our particular purpose. So we'll start by creating a class called FileSelector. And because we want this to be fairly sort of loose in its structure, we're going to use a layout that we haven't used a lot of before called a float layout. And we're just going to pass that for now. And because we're using a float layout, we do need to import that from the UIX library. So float layout, import our float layout. Once we've got that, we can now, not float layout, sorry, file selector, we can define this in our Kivy file and add in the elements. So for this, we're going to use a box layout to structure the elements within the float layout. So a little bit confusing there. But we'll do a vertical orientation. The size and position, we're just going to set to the root object. So basically the float layout size. Size and position. Yeah, so that's right. So just assigning it to, the file selector will take up the full screen. So this box will also take up the full screen. So as I said, there is a FileChooser object within Kivy, and there's two different views. You can have a list view or you can have an icon view. I personally prefer the icon view. And everything else will still work the same in this if you do change it to list view. So you can do either or. I'm just going to go with icon view. And with this, we just want to set the ID of it. ID to call it FileChooser. After that, we're going to use another box layout to hold a couple of buttons. So we'll make it a horizontal orientation. We're going to use a fixed height for this one. So previously we've used size hint to use a proportional size, but this one we're going to just set it straight to 30 pixels. Just again a different way of positioning elements, but we don't need big buttons for this one. And so the buttons in question need to be inside the box layout. Button. So the first one we'll call load. And the second one, having some trouble with my typing. And the second one will be to cancel. So basically the load button will load the selected file, cancel will just cancel the file selection. And I just realized I made a little error with my image that I was copying. So it talks about adding in a size hint. I'll just make sure I get it in the right place. So underneath here, so to get the height of 30 to activate, what we need to do is we need to say size hint y is equal to none. So basically what we're saying is it's not a proportional height, it's a set height. So I did forget that on the image that I created for the tutorial, but I did make a note underneath it. So that explains that. Alright, so now we've got our file chooser. I mean, if we test our code, I should have done this before to show you the basic setup, but it doesn't do anything yet. So we can't see the file chooser just yet. We do want to now add that in. So with the file selector, because it's a float layout, it's not a screen, so we're not going to use the screen transition. What we're going to do is we're actually going to put it inside of a pop-up object. So basically this will pop up over the main window, allow us to select the file, and then it will, once we load it or cancel it, it will shut the pop-up and then continue back in the main app. So again, another different look at how you can transition between views in your solutions. So we've got our open data method already defined. We do have load and cancel buttons, so we will define load methods and cancel methods. But yeah, actually we'll put the on presses once we've sort of fleshed these out a bit more, might be the best way forward. So for now we'll just follow the instructions. Stop trying to get fancy. Have load and cancel sitting there ready to go for those buttons. So with the open data method, so as I said, we want to create the file selector in a pop-up. So we're going to create an instance of the file selector and we'll call it content. So it's the content of the pop-up. And then we will create within the main screen, we're going to create an element called pop-up, which is an instance of the Kivy pop-up object. So the title of the pop-up, so this is basically what appears in the ribbon at the top of the pop-up. It'll say load file. The content of the pop-up will equal the content we've created, which is the file selector. And the size hint, so this will just give us a little bit of a border to frame it. If I can use the brackets properly. So 0.9 width, 0.9 height. Close the pop-up bracket. So because we're importing the pop-up object, we do need to add the import at the top. Alright, so once we've set up the pop-up, we then need to take it and open it. Alright, so we'll test this one first just to make sure we've got it popping up. So we open the app. When we click get data, you can see we've got the load file is the title. So you get the files here and you can see this is just from my D drive. So you can navigate through by clicking on the buttons. So the double dot goes back a level. Some people get confused by that. But you'll see the load and cancel don't do anything at the moment. But that's fine. That's all we've said is create a file selector, which is that file chooser that we've built. Open it up, and we'll get into it. Alright, the next one, even though we've got load listed next, we'll add the cancel because it's pretty simple. We just say self.popup self.dismiss. So basically just saying dismiss the pop-up, it will go away. Alright, so we'll save that, and actually we'll do the load one first before we test that. So with the load method, alright, this is where we want to actually load the file that we've selected. So we're going to try to do it anyway and say self.data. Actually, this is involving the this loading the CSV data from the library. So we had already created one previously. If I go to the File Explorer, so I've already preloaded it in here, but this was the one we did in Project 6. So import CSV. So you may want to copy and paste that from Project 6 into Project 8. You may want to also practice, type it out again. Obviously, if you want to do that, pause the video, get that going, or go back to Project 6 and look at the code and type it out. Alright, but we're going to use this because we do want to import the CSV file. So to do that, we're saying self.data is coming from the library, the importing of the CSV with path and a file name. Alright, so if we remember the import CSV, we've got to give it the folder and the file name. Alright, so I guess you can see there's a few things lit up here. So library we can import. Just close the terminal, it's in the way. So we'll import the library. So path and file name we need to get from the file chooser. So what we'll do is we'll put that in as parameters. Alright, so then self.data. So basically with the data that we've got this time, it does have headings in the first row. So we're just going to remove the first row by using the pop method. So pop is removing an element from a list. So in this case, we want to eliminate the first element, which is all the headings. We then want to call on our cancel method that we just created to dismiss the pop-up. And then we want to shift to the data screen. So equals data. So that's referencing down here the names of the screens. So once we've got the data loaded, we've removed the headings, we'll dismiss the pop-up, and then we'll transition the screen manager to the data screen. Alright, if we get an exception or an error, we're just going to print in the terminal. Alright, you could go back and look at Project 6 and incorporate some feedback to the user, but we're not really focused on that for this one. Alright, so now if we run this, we've got our windows, so we can try and select a file. So I've got to remember where I've saved this one. It's Project 8. Don't have it in there yet. But you'll notice as well when we try to use the buttons, it's not actually working. So that's because we haven't attached it yet. So let's go in on press root.open, load. Alright, and we need to pass in the path and the file name. So to do that, we say FileChooser .path, and so this will give us the directory of where the FileChooser window is loaded. And then FileChooser.selection. So this is basic, I need to spell selection correctly. So this is the file that you've selected is what we want to load. This one's pretty simple. It's just on press root.cancel. You don't have to pass anything in. Alright, so we'll test that now. So get data. We'll just cancel it. So file selector has no attribute cancel. So I guess the other thing we need to do to connect the cancel button to our our file selector is we need to do a load. Sorry, we need to set these as object properties, which we've talked about previously. So object property, type none. Need to import it in so we can actually access it. Alright, and then I guess what we need to do as well is we need to pass in load as self.load. So basically what this is saying is when we reference load in the file selector, it's connecting us to this. So load and cancel, cancel equals self dot cancel. So now that we've attached the buttons to the screen through the file selector and that instance that we've created, we should now get some functionality going. So get data, so we'll do cancel because that's easy, it just dismisses the pop-up. But I'll see if I can find the data that we need, because I will need it for future. That's year 11, year 12, 26. Actually, I think it was in videos, wasn't it? There it is, mapdata.csv. We hit load, and it says we've got an error. What else have I potentially missed? Oh, I know what we've done. So when we get the selection from the file chooser, it gives us a bunch of information about the file. So what we need to do is a slight little tweak in the import CSV. We just want file name, but we only want element 0 from that selection. So that's the actual file name. So that was the extra little bit that we forgot. So let's cancel this. Let's just kill the whole thing and start again. So cancel still works. Alright, let's go in and grab that file. So videos, project 8, map data. Alright, and so we've got a blank screen, which is actually a good thing. So this means that we've moved to the data screen. We've got the file selected. It didn't print an error. So it's all worked out well. I guess what you could do is, you could push some of this into like an else. So basically try to load the data. If there's no errors, then you can do that other stuff. But I've put it in the try just to keep things a little bit simpler because we are covering some crazy concepts here. Not that the file select is too hard once you get the hang of it. But I guess the other thing you might have noticed, if I just play it again, because I haven't really emphasized it, I've got to reopen it, is when you open it, it will go to the default folder. Oh, sorry, the default drive. So in this case for me, it's D drive, because these files that I'm loading and running are saved on D drive. If headset cut out, apologies. If you wanted to, for example, select a file from a USB drive, currently don't have that functionality built into our file selector, but we have the ability to add it. So I'm going to cancel out of this and close it all up, kill the terminal. And so what we're going to do, I'm just going to close this as well because it's cutting off some of my code. Apologies for people trying to copy. There we go, I think that's the best view. So we're going to look at adding in a drive selector. So basically the ability to select the drive that you're loading from. And so this is going to use what's called a spinner object. So a spinner in Kivy is probably the closest thing that it has to a drop-down menu. I guess because Kivy is designed to be cross-platform and be able to be used on like mobile devices as well as desktops that we're setting up for. A spinner has a bit more of a mobile style functionality, but it's essentially a drop-down option. So to include the drive selector, we're going to go into our file selector objects. Because we need to be able to access it in our code, we're going to connect it with drives. So before our file, so inside our box layer, so before the actual file chooser, we're going to add in a spinner, the ID of drives, which is how we can identify it, and we'll put size hint y of 0.1. So it'll just sit above the file chooser for us to access. We can test it to see that it's there. So if I bring my screen on, so this is the spinner, but it currently doesn't have any values, so you can't sort of use it like a drop-down menu just yet. Alright, so to add that in, we're going to include some more code into our file selector. So we're going to access the drives, which is the spinner object. So set that up. And then we're going to define the init method. So we've used init before, more so when we're setting up objects in our libraries, to sort of say, well, when we initialize this object, make sure you add these attributes. But with this, what we're going to do is we're going to use double star quarks, or KW args, some people will say. It stands for keyword arguments. Basically, this allows us to pass in a dictionary or multiple dictionaries of arguments or parameters to add to this method. So when we start up the file selector, we don't know what we're going to add in necessarily, but we're prepared for any and all of it. Alright, in line with that, the next line that we're going to use is a method called super. So super comes up quite a bit in Python programming when you're getting quite deep into your objects and setting them up. So I'm just going to type the line. So this one we say super dot init and quarks. So basically the super method is designed to inherit any values from the parent object. So obviously the file selector is an object, but it is inserted within the float layout, the pop-up object, that sort of thing. So I guess when we initialize the file selector, so this is when we run it here, we want it to also run any other initialization. So like when we initialize the pop-up with the file selector inside. So by saying super.init.quarks, it just says, yep, still do everything else normally, but we're going to give you some special instructions for this file selector that you're going to create. Alright, and so those special instructions are to identify the drive list. So we want to look at all of the drives that we have in the system. And so for this, we're going to create a list. Obviously, it makes sense. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of F strings. So F strings are a bit more dynamic than just adding in strings of text. So for this one, it's simply going to be D // Alright, and so that doesn't mean too much on its own, but then what we can do is we can add an inline iteration. So D as in D for drive in string dot ASCII, ASCII can't spell, /uppercase. So we're going to use a string object, or a string library I should say, and access the ASCII uppercase. So basically this is going to give us all of the letters of the alphabet from A to Z in capitals. Alright, and what have I done there? I've accidentally deleted. So string dot uppercase, but we're going to put a condition on it. If path, so the path that we've identified, so again using an F string, so D, hang on, get it right. So that's string, so if that exists. Alright, so you can see string and path are highlighted, so we need to import those. So string is actually just its own, it's a Python object, so we can just say string. And the path object actually comes from a Python library called pathlib. So from pathlib, import path. So yeah, so basically the F string that we're creating is D for drive, so that D is going to be each letter. So it's going to be A and then a colon and then a slash. So we use the two slashes to declare that that actually should be a slash and it's not trying to designate something else. So if you think about drive letters, they have like C, capital C, colon, slash, capital D, colon, slash. So that F string is creating that. But what we're doing is we're essentially creating every version of that in the alphabet for uppercase characters. And then we're checking the path, so the path object within path library, to see if it actually exists. So it'll check if you've got an A drive, a B drive, a C drive, etc., all the way through to a Z drive. So once we've generated that drive list, we're going to set the current drive to drive list element 0. So I guess when we've done the file chooser previously, it's defaulted to the D drive, but on the computer that I'm using, I do have a C drive. So you'll notice once I rerun it, it will open up in the C drive by default because that's the first alphabetically. You know, if you want to try and control it to be the default one, there is a way of doing it. It's just a little bit more complex. So we're trying to get it as simple as possible. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say for the drives object, which is the spinner object, the values that we want to put on there are equal to the drive list. And then drives.text, so I guess the default value, or the one that is going to be displayed, is the current drive. Alright, so we'll save that, give it a run, let's see if we've been able to get it. So you'll see get data, so we've got a C drive and a D drive. Alright, but you'll notice when I select it, it doesn't actually change. It's been stuck on this D drive the whole time. Alright, that's because we have to add one little piece, and that is in the file chooser object. I'll just make sure I've got it in the right place. It's actually on, so in the spinner. So what we say is on text, which is basically the way that we select the element of the spinner or access the element of the drop down, is when we're on that particular text, what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to set the file chooser path equal to its text. So the file chooser path, if it's on C drive, will be C drive. If it's on D drive, it will be D drive. Alright, so we'll save that. We'll run it. And so now you'll see I'm on C drive, so there's some different folders like Windows program files, but then when I change to D drive, it goes back to that view that we saw before. There is a little error popping up here. I don't think that's a big issue, to be honest. So yeah, so we've got our file selector now working in different drives. So wherever your file is saved, you can access it within this program. So I'm just going to kill those terminals. So now we've got the data in there. I guess what we want to do is we want it to display in our interface, and so because this data that we've got looks at the coordinates of Wi-Fi hotspots, we want to basically get on the map and show where those positions are on the map. To do this, we're going to take advantage of a Kivy package called MapView. So this is one that isn't built into Kivy, it's like an additional add-on, so we do need to install it. To install it, it's the same process as what we did when we installed Kivy, and that is by using the command prompt. Alright, and so if you've got the luxury of being off the Education Queensland system like I currently am, you can just use the command python -m for modify pip install MapView. Alright, if you are on the Education Queensland network, you do need to include the proxy details, so --proxy. I won't do all of it on this video because it won't work for me anyway. Alright, but those instructions are in the written instructions, and we have featured them previously on the Kivy video. So I'm going to run this. It should say for me that it's already installed, already satisfied. But for you, if you haven't yet installed it, it should take some time to come up. Alright, so make sure you've installed MapView into your Python interpreter. So now we can access it through our Python file. So we want to import it. So this one's a little bit different again because it's not part of Kivy. We want to do kivy.garden.mapview, import MapView, and we're also going to import map marker. So this is the object that actually designates the coordinates on the map. So the map view shows us the map, map marker adds the data to the map. Alright, so in our data screen, so we haven't added anything here. It's all going to be dynamically added because obviously we want to add the data points to the map. So we're going to create an instance of map. So it's a map view, and we do need to add in a few attributes. So LAT, short for latitude, LON for longitude, and then the zoom, so how much it zooms. So I guess I'll leave it with off just so you can see what it looks like, and then we can add in those later. So if we go, so we need to define a method called onEnter. So basically when we enter the data screen, which is triggered once we've loaded the data. Alright, we just say self.addWidget map, and this will add our map. So if I run this, alright, so you still have to go through the process of getting the data. So we'll go in, access it, was videos. So we've got our CSV data. No method bind, what have I forgot? Oh, sorry, I know what I've done wrong. It should be self.map. So yeah, so we're referring to the map within this object. So because it's inside the method, we do have to use self. So that's what I was doing wrong. Alright, so get the data again. So there you go, you can see the map there. Get like the whole world, so it is very zoomed out, so you do have to zoom in. And then, so I think I'm around Madagascar while it loads. So yeah, so as you can see, there's a bit to it, but you can scroll around and all that. But obviously we want it to be a little bit more focused, so this is why we can add in these attributes. So latitude, we're going to set it up to equal negative 31.95. Longitude is equal to 115.86, and zoom equal to 14. And this will give us a bit more of a closer view to where the data is. 2025. Oh, hang on, I just realised I'm doing this off screen. That's awkward. So we'll load the data, and then there you go. So I guess if your geography was good, you might have already worked out that latitude and longitude is for Perth. So this is a Perth city data set that we're working with. If you zoom out, not convinced, you can see more of Perth. If you zoom out enough, you can see the southeast corner. Keep zooming, you can see all of Australia. Alright, and yes, you can drive your way around, but we don't have time for that. So yeah, so we'll center the data a bit, or center the map a bit closer to where we want to see it. Obviously, if you don't know what the data set is, you might need to look at dynamically creating that based off the data. All right, but I just wanted to show you that's how you use those attributes, so you can then adjust them from there. All right, so once we enter the data, so we've got our map and its position. Now we want to actually add that data to our map. So once we enter the map, we need to get our data first. So we can get that from the screen manager. Going back to our main screen and getting the data from there. So we've done this previously when we've looked at like the login module, where we asked it to get the username to display. But it's basically going back to the main screen and accessing the data that we've accessed. So self.data, the data of the main screen. We've already loaded it in. So what we want to do then is for each point in the data, and so this will be treating it like a row, but we'll call it point so it makes a little bit more sense. We want to create a mark, which is an instance of the map marker with the latitude equal to point. So even though it's 0.1, it's referring to the second element. For whatever reason, the data sets it up as longitude first, then latitude. But we'll work with it. And longitude, actually I've given away the bit I was going to talk about, but that's okay. 0.0. So if we were to just run this, it would create an error because it reads this data as a text data. So we do need to convert it to a floating point, which is the Python equivalent of a decimal number. Obviously computers use binary math, so it is a little bit different. But float is a decimal point essentially in our code. So we've got a mark, which is that latitude and longitude. All right, we then go to our map and we add a widget on, which is our mark. So it'll do that for each row of data. Say, okay, get the marker, add it to the map. Once we're finished, it'll then build the map into our data screen. So we'll save that and we give it a run. All right, and all going to plan, this should work. So get data, select D drive, get the CSV file. And now you can see we've got our map, but we've also got all of these beautiful data points included. Alright, so some of you, if you are on the Education Queensland network, you might notice that you get the data points, but you get like a grey map. Unfortunately, because the map uses a HTTPS connection to get the data, and as you obviously adjusted it, it sort of updates it in real time, loading it from this website. Because of the Education Queensland system, there isn't really a way of getting around that particular firewall for this, and that is highlighted in the project. So I might just quickly bring the notes on here. So you'll see if you're not on the Education Queensland network, your fully functioning app will look like this. If you are on the Education Queensland network, your map will look like this. So if you see this, don't stress too much, because that's what it's supposed to look like. Obviously, it needs to be off the Education Queensland network for it to fully work in that sense. But if you presented this for your assignment and said this is as good as it's going to get for now, we would understand. Alright, so we've covered a bit of ground there. We've looked at adding a file selector, adding a drive selector to the file selector using a spinner or a drop down, and then combining data with an object like a map view to create something that's a bit more interactive, a bit nicer for people to use the data with.